vision to actions, and from legacy to institution. And indeed, it is in this spirit that I believe that UPSA will stand to explore the possibility of establishing a center for Professor John Evans Fifi Attah Mills. And if permission is granted, I think it will be a lasting legacy to commemorate such leaders in an academic environment which will be devoid of political, association and others. And this is what I present to the family, the government, and the organizers of this occasion, that it is time we have some of these programs organized on academic environment where we can flag out the history, the leadership experiences, and then create literature out of it for the future generation to learn from what this man stands for and other leaders. We hardly do that in our academic institutions. But when I travel to other institutions, they immortalize a lot of leaders by writing about them, and we are compelled to read about their literature and learn from their leadership style. And I think it is time that Ghana must chart the same path. That is why in the coming years, I hope and wish that it is only in UPSA that we may have former leaders of this university enshrined in our centers of excellencies. And throughout the year, we will organize lectures to share their experiences to the future generations. And I hope this proposition will be accepted by the stakeholders. Chairman said, there are a lot of lessons that I mentioned we can learn from our former president. And by extension, we acknowledge that the greatest beneficiaries of Professor Attah Mills' legacy are the generations yet to come. And we must inspire our young people to understand that leadership is service, integrity is strength, and transparency builds trust, and accountability is a responsibility. And Attah Mills Center of Excellence at UPSA will therefore send a powerful message to future leaders to lead with integrity, serve with humility, be transparent, embrace accountability, and always put the public good above personal interests. Indeed, the legacy of Professor Attah Mills must inspire us not merely to remember him, but to build a new generation of leaders who are worthy of trust and place the trust that we place in them. Finally, before I give my conclusion remarks and assume my seat, let me once again acknowledge the Chief of Staff and all those who I did not acknowledge. Indeed, it is very difficult to be the first speaker, especially when you are speaking and you raise your head and you can see faces that you have not acknowledged. In that regard, I want to welcome all of you. All of you. Yes, all of you. Please, all of you. You are welcome. "14 years on, Professor Evans Attah Mills reminds us that once again that true leadership is rooted in integrity once again. I've used this word throughout because it resonates with him. Transparency, accountability, and service. Let us honor his memory, not only by remembering him once again, but by living the values he represented. The proposed, I want to emphasize that the proposed Attah Mills Center of Excellence at UPSA can serve as a beacon of ethical leadership and a platform for nurturing young leaders. And 14 years on, once again, we remember, 14 years on, we are inspired. That is why we are all here present. And 40 years on, we really commit ourselves to building a Ghana where leadership by integrity, or where leadership is defined by integrity and service. Once again, may the memory of the late former president continue to inspire young generations and those yet to be born Once again, thank you and welcome to UPSA. And let's have a very fruitful commemorative lecture. Thank you. I guess I worked within time.
You did. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together one more time. Right, I've been given a list of dignitaries here to introduce to you, and with all due respect to lay down protocols, shall we please acknowledge the presence of Chief of Staff, Honorable Julius Deborah. Also here with us is the NDC National Chairman, the Honorable Johnson Asiedu Nketia. We have a majority leader in Parliament, the Honorable Mahama Ayariga. Also here, Council of State Elders of the Council of Elders of the NDC, the Honorable Kofi Tutubi Kwachi. And then I have here statesman and member of the Advisory Council of the Attah Mills Heritage, Mr. Kwame Mpieni. And the last but not the least on my list, I have the Member of Parliament for Komenda Edna Egwafo Abrim, and my own boss, the Honorable Samuel Attah Mills. Right, so to introduce the chairperson for today, ladies and gentlemen, shall we please invite the Deputy Chief of Staff, Finance and Administration, CEO and Secretary, JEA Mills Memorial Heritage, the Honorable Nana Oye Bampo Adu.
Thank you very much and good afternoon to you all. The Chief of Staff of the Republic of Ghana, Honorable Dr. Julius Deborah, the First Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Ghana, Majority Leader of the Parliament of Ghana, the National Chairman of the NDC, Honorable Johnson Asiedu Nketia, members of the Council of State of Ghana, members of the Advisory Council of the John Evans Attah Mills Memorial Heritage, executive members of the John Evans Attah Mills Memorial Heritage, our distinguished keynote speaker, members of the family of President John Evans Attah Mills, the Vice Chancellor and Management of the University of Professional Studies, Nime Name, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 14th Anniversary Commemorative Lecture in honor of our late President, His Excellency John Evans Attah Mills. It is my singular honor to introduce to you the chairperson for the 14th Commemorative Lecture. And I must confess that this duty is a joy for me beyond the ordinary. The distinguished woman I am about to introduce is not merely a distinguished chairperson for today's proceedings. She is a sister and a classmate from September 1978 from Wesley Girls High School, through to the University of Ghana Faculty of Law, through to the Ghana School of Law, and she is a seasoned peacemaker. We call her Honey. She is a seasoned peacemaker and one of the most consequential diplomatic voices our continent has produced in a generation. And for what it is worth, on an afternoon such as this, she is Accra had spoke. And she told me the story this afternoon why Accra spoke. Honorable Betty Maud Idrisu and Nana Oye. Like Honorable Betty Maud Idrisu and Nana Oye. Chairperson, Honorable Hannah Sewa Tete. She holds a Bachelor of Laws from the University of Ghana, Legon, and was called to the Ghana Bar in October 1992. She began her legal career with Ansah Asari and Chambers before she joined the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice. She later worked as the solicitor and legal advisor. To Ghana Agro-Food Company. In 2008, Hannah was appointed National Communications Director of the National Democratic Congress. She succeeded President John Dramani Mahama, who had become the party's vice presidential candidate alongside the late John Evans Attah Mills. Her steady handling of the party's communication strategy through that campaign made her one of the most prominent spokespersons, and following NDC's victory, she served from January to February 2009 as spokesperson for the President-elect John Evans Attah Mills' transition team. From 2009 to 2013, Hannah served as Minister for Trade and Industry. She was a member of the Economic Management Team for Ghana, the National Development Planning Commission, and the Millennium Development Authority Board, and also chairperson of the Ghana Free Zones Board. Her ministry developed the Private Sector Development Strategy Phase 2 and Ghana's industrial policy. She also negotiated the third expansion of Ghana's Rural Enterprise Program, co-funded by government and the International Fund for Agriculture Development and the African Development Bank. She expanded the districts on this program from 66 to 160 districts in Ghana. Ghana also co-hosted the African Trade Ministers meeting in 2011 under Hannah's leadership, whose recommendation to fast-track a continental free trade area culminated years later in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement of 2018. From January 2013 to January 2017, Hannah served as Minister for Foreign Affairs and Rural Integration and was a member of Ghana's National Security Council and the Armed Forces Council. Hannah introduced Ghana's Visa on Arrival policy for African citizens, the third country on the African continent to do so after Seychelles and Rwanda. She also secured cabinet approval for the Foreign Ministry to retain its own internally generated funds. Between 2014 and 2015, while Ghana's president chaired the Economic Community of West African States, Authority of Heads of State and Government, Hannah chaired the body's Council of Ministers and its Mediation and Security Council. She was able to steer the region through the resolution of the Malian conflict, a peaceful transition in Guinea-Bissau, and Burkina Faso's transition following the resignation of President Blaise Compaoré. In 2017, fellow foreign ministers of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development appointed Hannah to mediate the Second South Sudanese Civil War, negotiations that produced the revitalized peace agreement signed in September 2018. This established the government that sits in Juba today. Between assignments, she was the Richard von Wiska Fellow at the Robert Bosch Academy in Berlin, Germany. That same year, Hannah joined the United Nations as the Director General of the United Nations office in Kenya, the United Nations headquarters in Africa. Before she was nominated at the rank of Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, in that post she held from 2019 to 2022 under the joint 2017 Joint Framework Agreement on Peace and Security. Hannah worked very closely with the chairperson of the Africa Union Commission and the Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security. She coordinated the annual UN Africa Union Summit consultations and the joint meetings of both organizations' peace and security councils, and she served as a trustee of the Africa Union Peace Fund. From 2022 to 2024, Hannah served as the Secretary General Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa. She headed the regional office and worked with the Intergovernmental Authority on Development and its 8 member states. Hannah worked with the Africa Union, the Intergovernmental Authority, and Ethiopia in the Africa Union-led process that ended the Tigray War. She represented the United Nations as observer at the Pretoria talks, producing the November 2022 cessation of hostilities agreement, and reopened after 13 years of silence negotiations between Sudan and South Sudan on the final status of Abyei. This was tragically interrupted by Sudan's own civil war. Since February 2025, Hannah has served as Special Representative of the UN Secretary General and head of the United Nations Support Mission in Libya, an integrated political mission established in September 2011 following Libyan civil war, and this is to support an inclusive political process and long-term stabilization of Libya. Hannah presented a political roadmap to the UN Security Council last August and has since guided the largest, most inclusive national dialogue Libya has ever held on its soil. This was concluded only last month with recommendations addressing Libya's governance, political, security, and reconciliation challenges. Hannah now facilitates negotiations between the Government of National Unity and the Libyan National Army on reconstituting the High National Elections Commission and reforming the electoral laws to pave way for long overdue elections in Libya. Ladies and gentlemen, a personality of such caliber, whose life's work has touched Ghana, has touched the African continent and the wider world in equal and enduring measure, could not have been more fitting to be the chairperson for this 14th anniversary lecture, which is being held in tribute to the enduring leadership, legacy, and unwavering patriotism of Ghana's third President of the Fourth Republic, Professor His Excellency John Evans Attah Mills. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming your chairperson, Chairperson Hannah Sewa Tete. Your audience awaits you. That was an incredibly generous introduction, perhaps more than I deserved. The Right Honourable Chief of Staff, the Right Honourable Deputy Speaker of Parliament, the Chairman of the National Democratic Congress, the Majority Leader in Parliament, members of the Council of State, members of the NDC Council of Elders, members of the Advisory Committee of the John Evans Attah Mills Heritage, honorable ministers here present, honorable members of Parliament, Nananum Nime Name, friends of President John Evans Attah Mills and his family who are sitting right in front of us. Honorable Samuel Attah Mills, I have to recognize you for special mention. I always used to call him Uncle Sammy, and I still intend to do that, honorifics notwithstanding. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, and because I can see the colors, members of the great NDC family and fellow Akatamansonians. First, let me thank my colleague and friend, and indeed sister, Honorable Nana Oye Bampuado, the Deputy Chief of Staff, for that very generous introduction. And let me also thank the Attah Mills Heritage for inviting me to chair this year's 14th anniversary and commemoration of a very great man. I was privileged to have His Excellency President John Evans Attah Mills as my lecturer in university. He taught me commercial law and he taught me tax law. I was also privileged to have him as a mentor when he became our presidential candidate. Because without him, I don't think I would have succeeded in my first election in the year 2000 and have become a young member of parliament, a young politician, and the rest of what has happened in my life till date. He gave me a tremendous amount of support. And even though we were not successful in that election in winning the presidency, it was his hands that guided me on the path that has led me to where I am today. And when I had the opportunity to work with him in the 2008 election campaign as the Director for Communications for the NDC party, I thought that it was indeed an incredible opportunity given to someone who at that time was relatively young to be an important part of making history. I think that the honor that the University of Professional Studies, Accra, wishes to bestow on His Excellency President John Evans Attah Mills is indeed entirely appropriate. And thank you very much for that initiative. Because a center of excellence under the name of a leader who lived his values of service, of professionalism, of commitment, and of excellence is indeed an opportunity to give meaning to good governance within the context of Ghanaian history, our society, and for generations yet to come. So thank you very much, sir, for making that offer. I also very much want to thank all of those who have been responsible for organizing this very important event, because it gives us the opportunity to reflect on a great man, a humble man, somebody who, when you think about it in retrospect, was very self-effacing, most certainly did not draw attention to all of his stellar credentials, and was determined to make a team work together to deliver for the people of Ghana, a better Ghana, investing in people, investing in the economy, maintaining a transparent and accountable government for this country. And for the short period that he was our president, he certainly lived and led that aspiration. Now, you're not here to listen to a speech from me, because we have a very distinguished speaker who is going to give us an address that talks about the values that this esteemed gentleman, His Excellency President Mills, demonstrated, but also is able through that process to give us an insight in how he affected others who were not of the NDC party, and which of course makes him an astounding and exceptional statesman, one who will be remembered for the ages. And so I don't think I will continue for much longer because it's my pleasure, of course, to give the space to Honorable Dr. Frimpong Boateng, who will be properly introduced and who we will have the pleasure to listen to today. I think that coming together to commemorate such a wonderful leader also gives us the opportunity to reflect on what we can do to contribute to that process, how we can live the values that we saw President Mills living in his lifetime, not just talking about them, but actually doing them. Of course, for those of you who are his family, he has a very special place in your hearts. He was more than just a leader. He was a father. He was someone who nurtured you and someone who gave you the opportunity of training firsthand that many of us envy. And I'm sure that you continue to live and to make sure that his legacy lives in you. Because it is through that that we will also have living examples of what it means to be a descendant and a beneficiary of such a wonderful heritage. So without further ado, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I must say it's good to be home. It's good to be in Accra. Thank you very much once again for the invitation. And let me now hand over so that our speaker is properly introduced and you have the opportunity to listen to him. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairperson. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, reminding all of us in the auditorium and as well, or welcoming all of us that are tuned in live on television, on TV3 as well, live on Wazor TV, welcoming all our viewers from across the country and as well the world. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, today we gather here to honor a life of immense intellectual excellence, profound humility, and an unwavering commitment to our beautiful country, Ghana. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, again, we are truly blessed to be here with a gathering of constellation of leaders from every sphere of our public life, from governance, diplomacy, academia, tradition, and religion. Allow me acknowledge the presence as well, officially or formally, of the first Deputy Speaker of Parliament of Ghana, Honorable Bernard Ahiafo, who's also the MP of Akachi South. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. As well, acknowledging the presence of the members of the Attah Mills Heritage, members of the Advisory Council of the Attah Mills Heritage, members of the Council of State, the Wulome, chiefs and queens, ministers of states gathered present, CEOs that have made time to be here as well, national executives of the great NDC, regional executives of the great NDC, and as well constituency executives of the great NDC party, and members of parliament here present. Now, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we quite remember the man of peace, as we know and love. And it's time to get into the statement of our purpose of gathering. It's a pleasure to call back on stage a woman, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that is truly remarkable in every sense of the word. And she is going to do us the honors of the purpose of gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, Nana Oye Bampo Ado, our Deputy Chief of Staff. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. I stand on existing protocol. We are gathered here this afternoon for a purpose far greater than nostalgia. We gather to listen once again to a lecture on transformative leadership and governance, on ethical leadership, on peace and love for Ghana and for humanity, and on true values, virtues, and principles of a man who did not only live, but who made a profound difference in our body politic. This is our 14th lecture since the passing of our third president of the Fourth Republic of Ghana. Last year, we were privileged to have Madam Charlotte Osei deliver the lecture, and we were blessed with many revelations of who the late former president truly was to his students and mentees, drawn from her own experience as one of them. Indeed, Professor His Excellency John Evans Mills was a colossal figure, who meant so many positive things to so many categories of people, to his wife and his son, to his mentees, his students, his compatriots, to his beloved party, even to his critics, and above all, to our dear nation. His life was filled with an epoch of lessons. It has been said that the best way to honor a national hero is not to heap praises on him once he is gone. Rather, we must make a conscious effort to emulate what he stood for. This conviction drives everything we do at the John Evans Attah Mills Memorial Heritage. We believe in inspiring humanity for a better society, and our mission is to promote His Excellency John Evans Attah Mills' unique view of society, to cause positive action in strengthening our democratic values and advancing our common humanity. So it is in that spirit that we are here, once again delighted to celebrate the enviable leadership and personality of His Excellency John Evans Attah Mills. This lecture is part of a month-long bipartisan program of commemorative activities marking his 14th anniversary. Following today's proceedings, we'll gather again for a wreath-laying ceremony at Asumdwe Park on Friday, the 24th of July. And there will be a hockey tournament on the 25th of July in honor of a sport the President himself so dearly loved. It is our hope that when you leave here today, you would be inspired, ushered into a period of very honest reflection over your own public life, your education, your work, your business, and move towards the virtues that carry a nation forward. Extend love to humanity, tolerate your adversaries, and above all, help live up to your own unique calling. On behalf of the John Evans Attah Mills Memorial Heritage, welcome once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we hand over to the choir, Symphonal Chorale, to take us into a distinguished and exciting moment of music.
Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, I worked under him of the Ghana Tourism Development Company. He commanded an aura of peace, just like the elder brother. Wherever he went, he is acknowledged as a very peaceful man. And I know he's still carrying that across. Shall we please invite from Commenter Attah Iguafu, the Honorable Member of Parliament, and the brother of the late Professor John Evans Attah Mills, my boss, the Honorable Samuel Attah Mills.
Madam Chairperson, may I stand on existing protocols? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. The family is eternally grateful for all that you are doing for us. Let me tell you something. There was a day that Prof was very upset about something. And then he called me. And when he calls me big brother, I know there's something going on. He's like, look, when you die and I die and we come back as family members, never allow anybody to convince me to be president. We are here, brother, because you were the president. You said we should stay away from politics. You played your part, and now I'm a member of parliament, a third-term member of parliament. The family is grateful. You have made us proud. And big thanks to Memorial Heritage, to the great leader, great consultant, and the great conspirator. You guys have made this thing happen, and we very, very much appreciate it. And another update to my brother, if I could talk to him one-on-one. When I came to the castle, he told me that I should buy my own car, drive my own car, and then not get even a drop of petrol from the castle. Brother, I did it. And you remember the day that you were supposed to travel with me. I took my car to the car wash. And a very big man's driver told the car wash people, he's a big man, wash his car. They never did, because they said if I was a big man, I wouldn't have driven my car over there. Brother, you had to send a dispatch rider to come and get me. Now I have a driver, but I still go to the car wash. But car wash is not 50 cedis anymore, brother. When I go, I have to pay 10 times, 20 times that price. Maybe I should get a driver who will take my car to the car wash. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And a belated happy birthday to Big Brother. He was 82 yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable. At the core of it, while the nation loved him, he was at his core a beloved brother, husband, and father. And we thank you so much to the family for sharing him with us. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we're live on Clog TV as well, live on TV3 on channel 279 on DSTV, and live as well on Wazor TV, and on their social media handles as well, so you can share the link for someone who is not currently around to be able to view today's proceedings. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and a film is known as a moving picture. So that should be worth 1,000,000 words. At this point in time, we're ready to view a documentary that captures the true essence of the man we knew and loved, President John Evans Attah Mills. So please, ladies and gentlemen, avert your eyes to the screens and let us watch the documentary.
We have a country where only the privileged few are enjoying, while the generality of the people are wallowing in poverty. May God bless us all.
Evans Attah Mills presided over Ghana at a time when world economies had just been plunged into the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Through visionary leadership and direction, he was able to steer the nation through tumultuous times and oversaw the nation's rise as one of the best performing economies in Africa. Ghana became the fastest growing economy in the world at 20.15% according to the International Monetary Fund. His calm demeanor, love of peace and unity, and his gentle speech endeared him to many.
Let us know that there is only one country that we can call our own. That is Ghana. In 20-30 years to come, you will be taking over the mantle of leadership of this dear nation. Please, don't learn the wrong things that we are doing and saying.
The beloved president, nicknamed Ejah Attah, had a relatively short term of office as President of the Republic of Ghana, which was preceded by a much longer political career and life of service. Born in Takwa in 1944, the young John Evans was a brilliant man who dedicated his time to studies and sports, excelling in both fields. Upon completing his secondary school education at Achimota College, John Evans Attah Mills entered the University of Ghana, where he completed his Bachelor of Law degree. He went on to further his studies at the London School of Economics and Political Science, where he obtained an LLM in 1968, and further obtained his PhD in law at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London at the tender age of 27. After completing his doctoral thesis in the field of taxation, he returned to the University of Ghana, where he spent close to 25 years teaching until he was appointed Commissioner of the IRS, owing to his extensive work in the field of taxation. After serving as Vice President, he was given the nod to represent the National Democratic Congress as the presidential candidate in the year 2000. He lost the bid, and again in 2004. Even while out of office, he remained a strong political force that kept the government on its toes and spoke out on many occasions for the ordinary Ghanaian.
We think that politics is about human beings. That's all.
After winning the very closely contested election of 2008, his inaugural speech on January the 7th, 2009 did well to calm tensions and unify a society that appeared polarized.
We intend to pursue a consensus-driven agenda. And in building the consensus, we shall give due recognition to the contributions by our compatriots from the other political parties. As I have always said, I will be president for all Ghanaians. I will heal wounds and strive to ensure the unity of our country.
Such was the character of his presidency, and it was for this reason that the people gave him the title of Asomdrihin, the King of Peace. For Ghanaians, Professor Mills was known to be tolerant, well-mannered and measured in speech. He left no room for vindicativeness or score-settling, but rather channeled his efforts at galvanizing all sections of the Ghanaian society towards the achievement of developmental goals. infrastructure and attracting foreign investment. His prudent leadership yielded reduction in inflation and stabilized the Ghanaian cedi. Inflation came down to 8.4% in 2010 from a high of 18.1% in December 2008. This was indicative of prudent fiscal and monetary policy measures that characterized his presidency to put the economy in healthy shape. Ghana's budget deficit was reduced to 2% of the gross domestic product during his tenure. He established the Heritage Fund that was meant to save up Ghana's oil revenues for the benefit of future generations. He also implemented the single spine salary structure to increase compensation to workers. In a bid to improve efficiency in revenue collection, President Mills established the Ghana Revenue Authority, which integrated the Value-Added Tax (VAT) Service, Customs, Excise and Preventive Service (CEPS), and the Internal Revenue Service (IRS) into a single collaborative unit. He widened the spheres of democracy, accountability, due process and rule of law. He believed in the youth and gave the most promising among them the opportunity to serve in public office, mentoring them to be able to take over the mantle of leadership when the time was opportune.
We want to give you very good education so that when you become the leaders of Ghana in future, you will not be found wanting in any area of national life.
All this he did in his 3.5-year run as president of the nation that dearly loved him until death knocked at his door on the 24th of July 2012. His short run as president provided the world with insight into the qualities of a noble leader and statesman. He left a legacy of peace.
A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. But more than any policy, more than any statistic, he truly left us a spirit of unity, a spirit of humility, a spirit of peace. Music is a language of the soul, and today it will serve as a bridge to our memories as we reflect on the life and greatness of Professor Mills. Over to the Symphony Chorale.
Symphonial Choir, we're very grateful. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this beautiful, hard-working lady. She speaks multiple Ghanaian languages impeccably. She looks a lot younger than her age. My big sister, the MP for Shamar constituency, and of course the Minister for Fisheries and Agriculture, to introduce to us our keynote speaker for today. Shall we please welcome the Honorable Emilia Attah. Please accompany her with a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's indeed a very long walk to this podium. Madam Chair, Chief of Staff, all distinguished guests here, consider yourselves duly acknowledged. Ladies and gentlemen, 14 years after the passing of Professor John Evans Attah Mills, Ghana continues to wrestle with a question that is both simple and profound. What happened to the vision of a better Ghana? The question is not merely about a political slogan. It is about the kind of country we promised ourselves we would build. A country we founded on integrity, competence, justice, compassion, and service. And so, as we meet to commemorate his 14th anniversary, we are compelled to look beyond the past and honestly examine the Ghana we have built, the Ghana we have failed to build, the Ghana we have, and the Ghana that still remains within our reach. It is therefore particularly fitting that this afternoon's keynote speaker is a man whose own life has been defined by excellence, courage, and service to Ghana and the world. Professor Kwabena Frimpong Boateng is one of the most distinguished Ghanaians of his generation. Thank you. A world-renowned cardiothoracic surgeon, he became the first black surgeon globally to perform a successful heart transplant in 1985. He also performed Germany's first heart-lung transplant in a child, first in all of Europe in November 1988. But perhaps his greatest contribution to Ghana was his decision to return home. He came back to establish the National Cardiothoracic Center at Kolebu Teaching Hospital, a decision that transformed cardiac care in Ghana and has saved thousands of lives. His service has extended far beyond medicine. He has served as Chief Executive of Kolebu Teaching Hospital, Head of Surgery at the University of Ghana Medical School, President of the Ghana Heart Foundation and the Ghana Red Cross Society, Chairman of the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, and Minister for Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation. He has also been recognized nationally and internationally for his exceptional contributions, including as a companion of the Order of the Volta and a recipient of the Federal Cross of Merit of the Federal Republic of Germany. But beyond the titles and the honors, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Frimpong Boateng represents something especially relevant to our discussion this evening. The belief that nation building requires more than words. It requires excellence. It requires courage. It requires sacrifice. And above all, it requires a willingness to serve the national interest above all other interests. These values resonate deeply with the legacy of President John Evans Atta Mills. As we ask whether the vision of a better Ghana remains unfinished, we are privileged to hear from a man whose own life has been dedicated to building institutions, saving lives, and serving the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming our distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Kwabena Frimpong Boateng.
Madam Chair, actually the chairperson has given me permission to use her protocol list. So, Madam Chair, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I believe everyone in this auditorium and all those watching or listening within Ghana and across the world will agree that the legacy of Professor Mills is defined by peace, humility, integrity, transparency, accountability, academic excellence, servant leadership, and the rest. And his tenure as third president of the Fourth Republic was anchored in the rule of law and ethical governance. It is good to remember what Professor Mills accomplished in the 3.5 years that God gave him to serve Ghana. Yet, remembering what he stood for compels us to ask a more searching question. What would have been the condition of Ghana today if President Mills had had the strength to complete his first term and most probably also serve the second term? Professor Mills served from January 7, 2009 until his death on July 24, 2012. He was buried at the Asumdue Park on August 10, 2012. After years of neglect, a number of Professor Mills' friends, admirers, loyalists appealed to President Akufo-Addo to restore the Asumdue Park. This was done, and the completed facility was commissioned on July 24, 2022, on the 8th anniversary of his passing. It also took another act of generosity from Matthew Opoku Prempeh to fund the construction of the Atta Mills Memorial House and Library in Ekumfi Otuam, the ancestral home of Professor Mills. Meanwhile, the John Evans Atta Mills Residential Library and Research Facility, constructed and inaugurated in 2016, is reported to be in a state of disrepair. I'm, however, informed that renovation works have started, and I commend the government for that. Ladies and gentlemen, the floods that struck Greater Accra in the last week of June and the first week of July this year are a distressing illustration of the same institutional neglect. As the waters rose, I listened to politicians and opinion leaders urge residents not to dump waste into gutters and drains. This advice is well intended, but evades a deeper truth. Ghana has no serious system for collecting waste at the point of generation and moving it to disposal, recycling, or power generation sites. Ghana's own land use planning framework classifies certain areas as flood-prone and reserves them as protected open space. Yet, across Greater Accra, all all the 7 planned flood retention ponds in Papao, Medina, Oshiye, Ajurgano, 2 in Asharaboche, University Farms, and Sherman have all been encroached upon. Also, the buffers meant to protect water courses, such as the Lafa, have been overrun by informal development, sanctioned and tolerated by the very state institutions charged with enforcing the laws. On the western edge of Accra is a cement factory built in a Ramsar protected wetland. The factory was sanctioned by the MP, the chiefs, MMDCE, residents, and the seat of government itself, because it was classified as part of 1D1F in the Ramsar wetland. Madam Chair, a nation cannot summon the discipline to manage its waste and protect its wetlands, cannot by any stretch of imagination undertake the disciplined, sustained project of national development that Professor Mills envisioned. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, when I was approached to deliver this lecture, I asked myself, why me? I tried to discourage Ambassador Silvanus and Miss Louisa Boba. Let's go and look for another person. I didn't want to call Alex Sebefia because I knew he wouldn't listen to me. But I called Togwe Afede. I said, Togwe, they are playing a prank on me. He said, no, Professor, we want you to do it. And Louisa was very good. I think, Chief of Staff, that lady sitting behind you maybe deserves a higher position. I never belonged to Professor Mills' party, and twice he dismissed me. The first dismissal was in January 2009 on radio, one of the earliest announcements of his presidency. I learned along the rest of Ghana that I had been removed as chairman of the Public Utility Regulatory Commission, PURC. A chairmanship that had, until that announcement, been said to be exemplary. The second dismissal was in person. I had received a dismissal letter from Mr. Joseph Yelechre, the Minister for Health, on August, there he is. Joe, on August 25th, 2011, President Mills came himself to Kolebu on August 30th, 2011, accompanied by his own Achimota schoolmate, a professor of medicine, who then chaired the Kolebu Teaching Hospital Board, to confirm with his own eyes that I had packed my things and left Kolebu. But I stand here anyway, not despite those dismissals, but in a sense because of them. They are my credentials. A man who was removed twice by President Mills has no motive to flatter his memory. If I speak well of him, it is not because I owe him anything, it is because I knew him. I knew Professor Mills from 3 encounters, 11 years before the presidency touched him. And in those 3 meetings, I came to know exactly who he was. A very good person, a good man. I knew something else too. And I say it not to excuse, but to explain. The disease that will eventually take his life appeared to have affected him. And as the presidency wore him down and his strength declined by degrees, there were certain people in his administration who saw an opening, who use his fragility to pursue their personal agenda or to settle scores that were not his to settle. Let me be precise about what I am and I'm not saying. Professor Mills was ethical. He was compassionate. By every measure I was able to take of the man across 3 meetings, he was good. This is the man I will now ask you to meet. Not through the office he held, but through the 3 meetings in which he showed me who he was before the world knew him as Asumdwehene. Those who knew Professor Mills, even briefly, encountered the same man twice, the private figure and the public one. And they were not 2 different people wearing different masks. They were the same person at different volumes. His warmth and compassion towards people and severity towards wrongdoing were in him the same virtue pointed in 2 directions. Professor Mills carried himself exactly as Exodus 18:21 instructs. A man feared God and hated dishonest gain. Ladies and gentlemen, but goodness in a president is not self-executing. It does not by itself become honest and ethical governance, because the man is not the system. And in Ghana, the character of those who surround a good man can undo everything his own character was built to achieve. I knew Professor Mills at a level not many can imagine. The 3 meetings already alluded to shaped my understanding of the man. The first meeting was in 1998. I was visited by Professor Hans-Georg Bost, the extraordinary man who gave me the opportunity to do cardiothoracic and vascular surgery in Germany. I informed Dr. Eunice Brookmeyer-Emisa, the Minister for Health at the time, and who graciously led Professor Bost and a delegation from Kolebu to meet Professor Mills at the Osu Castle. It was a warm occasion. After talking about many things, Professor Mills commended Professor Bost for his role in establishing the Cardiothoracic Center. And Professor Bost, on the other hand, expressed the hope that Professor Mills' friends will provide the necessary support for cardiothoracic surgery to flourish in Ghana. The second meeting was in 1999, and it arose from a very difficult situation. Madam Chair, a minister of state in the NDC regime brought children requiring heart surgery to me on 4 occasions, each time invoking the name of the First Lady, Nana Akufo-Addo Royins, as a referral authority. I managed the first 3 cases, and the cardio center paid everything. And when the minister brought the 4th case, I asked whether the First Lady might contact me directly so that I could discuss some challenges with her. My simple request was apparently represented, and word reached President Lawrence that I had refused to take instructions. Ambassador J.L.M. Emerson, the secretary at the time, told me the president was incensed. He was livid. Who is this Frimpong Boateng? Who does he think he is? He is growing wings. So I resolved to go to the castle to explain myself. Many, including Ambassador Misa, counseled against it. I went nevertheless. Indeed, I went with Dr. and Mrs. Mary Grant because I thought she was one of the few people who could charm the president when he was incensed. But when I went, providentially, the president wasn't there. So I was directed instead to meet the vice president, Professor Attah. He received me warmly. And after I explained what brought me to the castle, Professor Mills looked at me for a minute and said, "Doctor, you are not in Ghana because of one person. You came down from Germany to serve Ghanaians, and that should be your focus. Forget everything you were told and go back to Kolebu and do what you know best." I was quiet and I said, I should have known that. And then he said something very revealing. He said, "Doctor, let me tell you something. If you know what I go through here on a daily basis in this house, you would not have driven from Kolebu to complain to anybody." I said, "Thank you, sir." I took the advice and returned to do my work. That was the assumption before the word had a name for it. A man absorbing pressure quietly rather than passing it downwards as lesser leaders often do. I should add that in later years, President Rawlings and Nana Akufo-Addo became friends of mine. She like a sister and he like a brother. And Mrs. Jan used to say he has two adopted sons, Jerry Rawlings, the troublesome one, and Frimpong Boateng, the calm one. Madam Chair, the third and most consequential meeting with Professor Mills occurred in June 2001. The National Democratic Congress had lost the December 2000 elections, and Professor Mills was scheduled to travel to Canada in September 2001 to take up one-year appointment as visiting scholar at the University of British Columbia and a senior associate at the Liu Center for the Study of Global Issues. As part of the visa process, Professor Mills required a medical examination. He did everything. All the test results were normal, except the ECG, or the EKG electrocardiogram, which was flagged for a second opinion. So Professor Mills walked to my office with his ECG tracing. I called the cardiologist. We sat down, went through it, and saw that it was normal. And so I dismissed the cardiologist. Then the two of us sat down for a very long time. And we spoke frankly, discussing issues including governance, national development, patriotism, and above all, the fight against corruption. In that 1 hour, I came to understand the mindset of Professor Mills very clearly. I appreciated what motivated his principled, godly stance on national issues. We agreed that Ghana will not achieve any appreciable development without sustained attention to fighting corruption and building indigenous capacity in science, technology, and industry. We agreed that the structure of the Ghanaian economy had to change from one dependent on the export of raw materials to the one dependent on the production of industrial goods and services. This lecture draws on the issues we discussed that afternoon. And so the themes I shall be talking about will be Better Ghana Agenda, Governance and the Fight Against Corruption, Ghana and the Problem of Self-Deception, Ghana, a country of missed opportunities, the poverty gap is a technology gap, and the daily burden of Ghanaians. The Better Ghana Agenda, what was achieved? Professor Mills coined the term Better Ghana Agenda in 2007 to address the shortcomings in Ghana's socio-economic development. The economy, employment, health, education, agriculture, utilities, transport, public discipline, and others. The thrust of the policy was not to declare Ghana good overnight or better the following day or the following year. It was to progressively improve deficiencies so that one day Ghana could be characterized as good. It was a process, a direction of travel. So in the relatively over 3 years that the policy was implemented, appreciable gains were recorded across virtually all sectors, as we all know. Strong economic growth and significant reduction in the budget deficit a fall in inflation to single digits, significant reduction of schools under trees, expansion of universal health care coverage, solid environmental sustainability portfolios, Ghana officially achieving lower middle income country status, and the cocoa sector reached a historic milestone, production of 1 million metric tons of cocoa in a year. Then the commissioning of the first oil from the Jubilee field on December 15, 2010, the event that marked Ghana's official entry into the ranks of oil-producing nations. It must be acknowledged, though, that the oil discovery was made during the Kufuor administration, but it was President Mills' government that supervised the crucial development phase and brought the project into commercial production. Professor Mills established 2 universities, specialized universities, during his tenure: the University of Health and Allied Sciences in the Water region, the University for Health and Natural Resources in the Brong-Ahafo region. He also launched a program to re-equip science resource centers in all the districts in Ghana to strengthen the teaching and learning of science in the country. These were not cosmetic achievements. They were the early years of purposeful, integrity-led governance. Governance and the fight against corruption. One of the subjects Professor Mills and I discussed endlessly was corruption. We had both studied the transformation of Singapore under Lee Kuan Yew. As you know, when Lee Kuan Yew took office in 1959, he said he was sickened by the greed, corruption, and decadence in many Asian countries, Asian leaders. And he had a deep sense of mission to do things differently, to establish a clean and effective government. With determination and a program based on scientific development, Lee Kuan Yew and his team kept to that promise. And Singapore, which in 1819 was a village with only 120 people, with no natural resources and hinterland, prepared itself from third world squalor to first world affluence in just 35 years. Professor Mills, despite operating within an entrenched Ghanaian system, attempted to do things differently. He reduced the number of ministers from 87 under the preceding Kufuor administration to 73, a reduction of 16%, with a projected annual savings of $4 million. Hundreds of special assistants, presidential staffers, spokespersons were eliminated to improve fiscal discipline. He commissioned a review of the 1992 Constitution, appointing Professor Fiajo as the chairman of the commission. Indeed, the government produced a white paper, but the white paper was not implemented because of the closeness to the 2012 elections. President Mills took accountability seriously. Barely 6 months after he was sworn in, one minister resigned, following findings of financial impropriety. 2 federal ministers tendered their resignation in another 3 months after allegations of accepting bribes from a foreign country surfaced. Throughout his tenure, underperforming and ethically compromised ministers were removed consistently, visibly, and without sentiment. These were not the actions of a man performing accountability. They were the actions of a man who believed in it. And, ladies and gentlemen, contrast that record with more recent episodes to show how far we have drifted. During the banking sector cleanup, a number of bank owners were found to have used depositors' funds to enrich themselves and were arraigned before the courts to answer for it. But when the new government took office, the Attorney General simply announced that the government was not interested in those cases. Not that the people were not guilty. He said, no, we are not interested. So a legitimate legal process already underway was terminated the men who stood accused of stealing from depositors' money were merely released. Not merely released, some were rewarded with lucrative appointments. One was even given a gold mine. Ladies and gentlemen, if Professor Mills' insistence that ministers accused of wrongdoing be removed without sentiment reflected an ethic of accountability, this episode reflects the opposite, an ethic of impunity in which a political victory becomes a shield against justice rather than an occasion for it. Ghana and the problem of self-deception. Ladies and gentlemen, our presidential system of government is modeled after the American system, just as the Second Republic was modeled on the Westminster system. But in adopting the American system, Ghana did not adequately research into its cultural and spiritual foundations. The American system is built on biblical understanding of human nature. Specifically, that man is fallible, and prone to sin. It is precisely this understanding that produced the elaborate system of checks and balances, independence of the executive, legislature, and judicial branches, each limiting the power of the others. And the separation of powers was taken from the book of the prophet Isaiah, chapter 33 and verse 22. I quote, "For the Lord is our judge. The Lord is our lawgiver. The Lord is our king. It is he who will save us." What he's saying is that the Lord is our judge, judiciary. The Lord is our lawgiver, parliament. The Lord is our king, executive. It is he who will save us. Indeed, it is only the God of creation that can be the king, the judge, and the lawgiver, and still be fair to everybody. So, the founders of America did not trust any person with all the three powers, not even themselves. That restraint is the foundation of their democratic durability. Ghana prepared a fourth Republican constitution that makes the president so powerful that he is able to exert influence everywhere, on the judiciary and parliament and almost everywhere. Worse still, to protect the excesses and corruption of a president, entrenched provisions are crafted to shield the president from the reach of the law after he exerts the presidency. This is not how democracy looks like. You see, the governance system of our traditional areas endure precisely because they are rooted in the traditions, beliefs, and spirituality of the people. In the Ashanti Kingdom, for example, people think carefully before invoking the great oath of the Asantehene, because there are real consequences when oaths are flouted. Now, those who doubt the importance of spiritual and cultural foundations to constitutional longevity should just compare the American Revolution of 1776 and the French Revolution of 1789. The American Revolution began with an appeal to the sovereignty of God. The French was founded on the sovereignty of man, on the liberal humanistic theories of Voltaire, Rousseau, Montesquieu, and the rest. The French Revolution was a catastrophe. Chaos, anarchy, and tyranny left 40,000 people dead. And the resulting constitution lasted only 2 years. Indeed, the French have had 7 constitutions the same time that the Americans have had 1. So, Ghana, independent for 70 years, almost 70 years only, has had 4 constitutions. And the 4th one is under review. So the question is, who should lead us? But since we have chosen a democracy whose rules lie in biblical precepts, we should also attend to those precepts about leadership. In Exodus 18:21, Moses received these instructions: select capable men, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials. Deuteronomy 1:13 echoes the same sentiments. Choose wise, understanding men, and I will set them over you. Prophet Samuel was such a man. He understood the eternal principles that guarantee good governance. He understood bribery as both a legal infraction and as moral offense against his people. This understanding shaped every decision in his public life. A leader who professes faith but is not genuinely committed to God is merely a pretender. Now let's look at Ghana, a country of missed opportunities. Ghana's first and most consequential missed opportunity came at the very dawn of its economic life. In 1963, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah presented the 7-year development plan to Parliament. It was a program designed to carry Ghana towards import substitution and industrial job creation, and with time, towards the export of industrial goods and services. It was a deliberate effort to root the nation's growth in its own productive and scientific capacity, drawing on the work of CSIR and Ghana Atomic Energy Commission and the universities, particularly Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. The plan survived barely 3 years of implementation. When Nkrumah was overthrown in 1966, the 7-year development plan terminated with him, and Ghana's path towards a self-reliant, technologically driven economy was abandoned along with it. Had the plan been allowed to run its course and had successive governments built upon it rather than discarded it, Ghana might well have kept pace with countries such as Korea and Malaysia, both of which entered the 1960s at levels of development comparable to or even behind Ghana. Instead, those countries pulled ahead, and Ghana's research institutions were left to wither. Then the Kofi Annan movement. For 9 years, a Ghanaian led the United Nations. We were proud. You have every right to be proud. But pride is not policy, and admiration is not strategy. Ghana never leveraged that extraordinary relationship with Kofi Annan to seek transformative assistance from the UN system, particularly the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, to place this country on a path towards sustainable socio-economic development. Indeed, Ghana's first real industrial partnership with UNIDO was not signed until 2019, 13 years after Kofi Annan had left office. And it was financed by Europe, not by us. Compare that to India, that spent over 50 years burdened on that relationship, government after government, until it became one of UNIDO's top 10 donors, paying into the Industrial Development Fund. Thus, India went from asking for help to giving it. That is what 50 years of discipline looks like. Ghana has no such story to tell. Missed opportunity. The University of Mines we have, and the plans we lack. Another missed opportunity. There are few countries in the world with universities or schools dedicated to the study of mines. Among them are Colorado School of Mines in the USA, Western Australia School of Mines at Curtin University, McGill in Canada, Central South University in China, University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, TU Beck Academy in Freiburg, Germany, and the Camborne School of Mines in the UK. Ghana has the George Grant University of Mines and Technology in Takwa, formerly Takwa School of Mines. The countries on that list have built sustainable mining industries using indigenous technology and locally developed human capital. Ghana has not. Instead of advancing sustainable mining with graduates from our own university, we are content with promoting the type of mining that destroys our environment, our rivers, and our biodiversity. What is the point in having a school of mines if we have no national plan for its graduates? Can we regard the abandonment of the Better Ghana agenda as lost opportunity? Well, it is up to us to tell. The poverty gap is a technology gap. Indeed, perhaps the most important thing Professor Mills and I discussed in that June 2001 conversation was this, that the real difference between the developed countries in America, Europe, and Asia, and the underdeveloped countries in Africa are not in resources, not in geography, but in technological capability. The extent to which a country can access, utilize, create science and technology for the solutions of socio-economic problems. To be part of this modern world, a country must allow science, technology, and innovation to drive its development. Unfortunately, most African countries, including Ghana, have declined that invitation. Consequently, the numbers are against us, well, I'm sure. Africa is the second largest and second most populous continent, covering an area of 20.4% of the Earth's land surface, and is home to at least 16% of the world's population. Yet, Africa's contribution to world commerce is less than 1%. The bottom 25 countries on the Human Development Index list are all in Africa. And the irony of our situation is that we spend $4 billion recruiting and paying 100,000 expatriates, whilst at the same time we look on and 250,000 equally qualified Africans leave the continent to work elsewhere for lower salaries. In Ghana, I'm told approximately 80% of inputs into agriculture, education, and health come from foreign sources. Listen, Madam Chair. Ghana is the 47th most populous country in the world. In other words, if we take China, India, and other the countries according to population, we are the 47th most populous country in the world, when you take population alone. But when you talk about Human Development Index, that takes into account life expectancy, income, and education, then Ghana falls to rank 148 out of 181 countries. In other words, we are a big population, not developed. Human Development Index, that takes account into life expectancy, income, and education, then we are down. In 1961, Korea's GNP was 2.3 billion, and its top exports in 1970 were textiles, plywood, and wigs. Today, it is the 13th largest economy and global leader in semiconductors, LCDs, shipbuilding, and automobile manufacturing. Samsung, one company, which began 87 years ago selling dried fish. Samsung started 87 years ago selling dried fish. Now, it accounts for 23% of Korea's GDP, with annual revenue of $240 billion. One company. $240 billion, more than the GDP of 150 countries, including Ghana. China's story confirms the same story. In 1986, 4 weapon scientists wrote a letter to Deng Xiaoping, the Chinese leader, saying China is falling behind in the world's technological revolution. And Deng Xiaoping's answer was the 863 program, China Program 863, a sustained national commitment to science and technology. China had virtually no solar production in 2003, but 5 years later, it was producing more solar panels than the countries that invented them. Neither country succeeded by accident. Both made deliberate, long-term investment in research, science, technology, and innovation infrastructure, sustained across successive governments. That is the lesson Ghana has yet to learn. No country ever developed without the capacity to produce machines, spare parts, equipment, technical goods needed to power the economy. Ghana must build that capacity because, as we know, the fight for genuine economic independence is greater than the fight for political independence. And here one sees the danger of short-term initiatives. The Better Ghana agenda was shelved. Now I'm told it's evolved into research agenda. For far too long, Ghanaian governments have measured their success by the infrastructure that they construct. Ghanaian government, the Fourth Republic, their success is determined by the infrastructure they do: roads, schools, hospitals, dams. These are not all important. These are not unimportant, but they are not by themselves development. To me, the true measure of leadership is the extent to which the people can be mobilized to lead independent lives, to feed, shelter, clothe, defend, and heal themselves with their own means, to produce tools, implements, and spare parts they need for daily living and industrial development and growth, so that if for one reason or the other ships and aircraft cannot access our country, we can still be here and survive. This requires long-term planning and execution, as Professor Mills said with his Better Ghana agenda, which many people did not understand. But I understand it very well because of the conversation I had with him 11 years before. When he said that, I knew exactly what he was trying to arrive at. We need long-term planning. What we have instead is a succession of politically named programs that disappear when the president who launched them leaves office. Planting for Food and Jobs was supposed to have reached 1.2 million farmers between 2017 and 2022. Yet by 2025, virtually nothing remained of it. One district, one factory, Agenda 111, the 24-hour economy, the Nkoko Ketenkete are all cut from the same cloth, well-intentioned, politically announced, and structurally incapable of outlasting a change in government. Any genuine development program must place research institutions, CSIR, atomic energy, the universities, the Ghanaian diaspora at the center, not at the periphery. Science and technology infrastructure, such as foundries and CNC machine tool centers, must be built and sustained across administrations. And now when you look at Ghana, you can see some element of abdication of responsibilities by governments. While President Mills established 2 specialized universities and built science resource centers in all districts in the country, the general trend in the Fourth Republic is that governments are not merely failing to invest in Ghana's institutions, they are actively abandoning their obligations to them. What began as underfunding has become abdication. I think my little brother, the education minister, is here. He's looking at me. You see, our universities are chronically starved of funds. The predictable result is that these universities turn to student fees as their primary, and in many cases, their only source of income. Research institutions face the same indignity. CSIR, atomic energy, institutions that should be the engines of Ghana's technological transformation have been instructed. I know it. Have been instructed, and my majority leader knows it. He was Minister for Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation. That these institutions have been instructed by successive governments to commercialize their research activities simply to keep their doors open. This is a profound misunderstanding of how science works and how nations develop. No country that has achieved technological advancement has done so by demanding that its public research institutions pay for themselves through the market. Successful countries fund their research institutions generously and hold them to account for outcomes, not for revenue. Ghana is asking its scientists to be entrepreneurs first and researchers second, and then wonders why there is no indigenous technological breakthrough to show for it. In fact, the most alarming is the fate of Ghana Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. The EPA has been left to fend for itself, instructed to find the money to pay its own employees and fund its regulatory functions. The EPA is supposed to find money to pay workers and fund their regulatory functions. The result is entirely predictable. An agency charged with protecting Ghana's environment, biodiversity, and public health has been reduced to issuing permits as a revenue-generating exercise without the capacity to provide meaningful oversight, conduct proper environmental impact assessment, and enforce compliance. It is therefore no surprise that environmental pollution is visible everywhere in our rivers, our soil, and our air. Illegal mining destroys our water bodies not merely because of lawlessness, but because one of the institutions mandated to prevent that destruction has been defunded into irrelevance. This abdication is not accidental. It is the cumulative result of governments that treat public institutions as liabilities rather than assets. Professor Mills understood that duty. He reduced the size of government not to weaken the state, but to make it leaner and more capable of fulfilling its core obligations. A government that cannot fund its universities, its scientists, and its environmental regulators has not found a clever way to save money. It has found a certain way to destroy the country's future. Now, the few minutes ahead of me, I will come to the daily burden on Ghanaians. Something that pressed Professor Mills, talking to him. The daily burden on Ghanaians. And here, let us speak frankly. For millions of Ghanaians, each day begins not with promise, but with calculation. A silent, grinding arithmetic of what can be afforded, what must be sacrificed, and what will simply have to go. Indicators of macroeconomic recovery, as we are seeing now, are rare. I can feel it, that there are indications of macroeconomic stability. And they matter. But they do not travel to work by trotro in the heat of Accra or any other city. They do not pay 2 years rent advance. The reality of life of ordinary Ghanaians and the story told by headline statistics have for far too long diverged. And that divergence is a moral failure of governance. Transportation. See, transportation is the first thing millions of Ghanaians confront every morning, the last thing they endure every night. According to the National Transport Survey, the average one-way commute in Greater Accra is over 110 minutes, 2 hours, covering a distance of 3.3 kilometers. Workers spend 2 hours in trotro, covering a distance of 3.3 kilometers. So, working days in Accra average over 12 hours when commuting is added. And the financial toll is equally severe. Daily commuting expenses consume about 22% of monthly salaries of middle-income workers in Accra. amounting to approximately 5,300 cedis every year for people earning between 2,000 and 3,000 cedis a month. Every Ghanaian who pays taxes is paying the people in government to improve their lives, not in speeches and results that visibly and measurably lessen the daily burden of ordinary citizens. If the transport problems are to be addressed, there must be specific targets which should be non-negotiable. Every worker and commuter in Accra should be able to go home within 1 hour, or within 45 minutes in Greater Kumasi, within 30 minutes in Tamale, Sekeni Takoradi, Wa, Boroga, Navrongo, Ho, and Cape Coast. These are not aspirations. They are the minimum standards owed to every Ghanaian who pays into this state. But getting there requires full functionality of every traffic light in the city, maintained and controlled as a non-negotiable urban standard. Comprehensive traffic regulation, not occasional crackdowns. There must be dedicated bicycle lanes in all major urban centers, making cycling a viable, safe, and dignified mode of transport. I want to repeat that. Bicycle lanes in our cities. We must have reliable, affordable intercity bus service with published timetables and enforceable standards. When I was in primary school, the bus service, the bus stops, you don't have timetable. We knew when they were stopping. And now after 70 plus years, you are there. So, intercity bus service with published timetables. A phased tram and light rail program for Greater Accra, Kumasi, and later other cities. A national railway network built not for ribbon cutting, but for daily freight and passenger transport. These are achievable. Countries far poorer than Ghana have built them. The question is not whether Ghana can afford to do this. The question is whether Ghana can afford to continue as it is. What about the housing crisis? We have faced a deficit of between 1.8 and 2 million units, and the gap widens by every year by 100,000 housing units. The World Bank estimates that Ghana meets only 33% of its housing needs, and over 60% of Ghanaians live in informal settlements without access to clean water and sanitation. These are not statistics from a country in crisis. These are statistics from a country that has accepted crisis as its normal condition. We cannot allow this to continue. What is required is not another announced program, but a sustained, funded, cross-administration national housing strategy built on three pillars. A national affordable housing fund, 2, reform the mortgage system, and 3, a mandatory enforced national rent code. What about food? Sometimes we think there's food. Ghana is said to be an agricultural nation, and this fact has been repeated so often that it has lost its power to shock. But here is what should shock us. According to data from the Ghana Statistical Service, 13.3 million Ghanaians, nearly 40% of the population, were food insecure in 2024. That figure rose by 7.3% in 1 year alone. In the Volta region, food insecurity stands at 52%. In Greater Accra, it jumped from 20 to 29% in a single year. Female-headed households are now 44% food insecure. We are not talking about hunger in the abstract. We are talking about children who will grow stunted, cognitively impaired, and unable to fulfill their potential. Not because Ghana lacks the land, the sun, or the rain, but because Ghana lacks the governance to connect its agricultural capacity to the needs of the people. 4 interventions are overdue. They are not optional. We need a national food assistance program, strategic investment in post-harvest infrastructure, credit inputs and technology for smallholder farmers, a food price monitoring and intervention mechanism. I don't want to bore you with electricity tariffs, which have increased so much. At the same time, that charcoal prices have risen from 52% year on year, and the rent costs have also increased. So when you take the housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuel categories, they account for 37% of Ghana's headline inflation. You see, the burden does not fall evenly. For a low-income household, a utility bill increase of 14% is not a line item in the budget. It is a choice between electricity and food. For a small business operator, it is the difference between profitability and closure. And yet, throughout this period of accelerating tariff increases, a significant proportion of public officials have been shielded from the full cost of these utilities through government-provided subsidies and allowances. This is not merely inefficient, it is unjust. Those who govern Ghana should feel in their household budgets exactly what they are imposing on the people they were elected to serve. And these were the burdens of Professor Mills. Now, what about inequality? Ghana's Gini coefficient, Gini, G-I-N-Y coefficient, that is the standard measure of inequality in any country, stands at 43.5, which is far ahead above the world's median of 35.9. Ghana's Gini coefficient is 43.5. The world's median, the global median is 35.9. This number says that Ghana is a substantially more unequal society than the world average. The gap between the rich and the poor in Ghana is wider than the gap between the rich and the poor in all developed countries. So, it says that the gap between those at the top and those at the bottom are not only economic, but civilizational. The teacher in Tamale and the minister in Accra inhabit different countries. The nurse in Hohoi and the political appointee at Ridge in Accra live under different material laws. One pays market price for electricity, the other receives fuel coupon. One spends 4 hours a day in a trotro, the other has a government vehicle. One struggles to pay 2 years advance rent, the other occupies a government bungalow. And the thing is that when those who make decisions about transport, housing, food, and utilities are insulated from the consequences of those decisions, they have no personal stake in getting them right. Madam Chair, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the challenges I have described are not natural disasters. They are policy failures accumulated over the years across governments, across generations. We know that policy failures can be reversed by policy decisions. What is required is a government that is willing to be held to a standard to be measured not by the projects it announces, but by the time it takes a worker to get home. Not by the housing programs it names, but by the number of families that stop paying rent in advance. Not by its agricultural sector's contribution to GDP, but by the number of Ghanaians who can afford to eat well every day. Professor Mills understood this very well. He understood that governance is the daily work of improving people's lives through decisions that are sometimes politically costly and always morally necessary. 40 years on, the daily burden of Ghanaians has not lightened, it has grown heavier. The measure of whether we truly honor his legacy is not what we say at this anniversary lecture. but it's what we do beginning from tomorrow to lift it. 14 years on, where is Ghana now? Professor Mills envisioned a Ghana that was getting better, a Ghana marching, however gradually, towards the kind of transformation he had witnessed in Asia. 14 years after his death, we owe it to his memory to be honest about where we actually stand. The question is, what will make the difference? What will make the difference? In the spirit of the Better Ghana agenda, Ghana needs to make deliberate, sustained, politically costly choices. To make a national decision to invest in education, science and technology, and sustain it from one administration to the next across generations. Ghana should develop an industrial policy not around extracting resources, but adopt a knowledge economy and build the capacity to manufacture. We must invest in the Ghanaian human capital, uphold the rule of law, zero tolerance for corruption, with the understanding that integrity is not luxury for small nations. It is a survival requirement. Ghana can no longer afford to make decisions by electoral cycle. Every administration launches its own program with its own name and its own political branding. Every administration abandons the program of its predecessors, even if they are from the same political party. Research institutions are underfunded, graduates emigrate, the city falls, IMF arrives. Professor May saw this clearly when we met in 2001, and he said it so plainly. He would say the same today. Ghana is not simply behind, Ghana is falling behind in absolute terms relative to the countries we once marched. The question this letter poses, and the question every Ghanaian leader must answer, is whether the next 14 years will look like the last 60, or whether we will finally choose the path that Professor Mills pointed towards. Ladies and gentlemen, we must reflect on how the great intentions of our presidents were tragically subverted. My unjustified dismissal are minor points to me. But we must reflect on how zero tolerance for corruption, the pledge to protect the public purse, the pledge to enforce probity and accountability, and other presidential pledges, including the current pledge to fight galamsey, have all been subverted to the detriment of Ghana. The legacy we owe. I'm concluding. 14 years after his passing, what does Ghana owe President John Evans Attah Mills? We do not owe him monuments, though monuments are fitting. We do not owe him commemorative lectures alone, though remembrance is important. What we owe him, what this nation owes his memory, is the courage to do what he tried to do, to govern with integrity, to lead with humility, to plan for the future rather than the next elections, and to place the welfare of ordinary citizens above the interests of those in power. Honestly, as far as I'm concerned, Professor Mills did not practice family and friends and concubines government. Professor Mills understood that the battle for Ghana's soul is not fought in press conferences or party conventions. It is fought in the decisions of public servants who choose honesty over convenience, in the offices of engineers and scientists who stay in Ghana and build here, in the workshops of entrepreneurs who manufacture rather than import, in the hands of citizens who demand accountability from those who govern them. Professor Mills understood that the poverty gap is a technology gap. and that choosing it requires not the boldness of one president's initiative, but the sustained commitment of a nation across generations and across administrations. He understood that a constitution is only as strong as the character of those who swear by it. He understood, perhaps above all, that leadership is not about power. It is about service. It is about the worker who needs to get home in 1 hour. It's about the child who needs heart surgery regardless of whose name is invoked. Professor Mills gave Ghana 3.5 years. 14 years on, Ghana has the chance to give Attah Mills something warmer than any monument. A worker who reaches home to her children while there is still light in the sky. A child who receives heart surgery she needs without a single name being invoked. A young scientist who comes home from abroad and is simply told, as he once told me, go and do what you know best. That is the tribute most worthy of the man Ghanaians came to know as the Asumdwehene. Not carved in stone, but lived out day by day in the choices of those entrusted with Ghana's future. Asumdwehene, rest in perfect peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Frimpong-Boateng, for that wonderful, thought-provoking lecture. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, sir, for your contribution to honoring the legacy of President Attah Mills. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcoming all our viewers live across Ghana on TV3 on DSTV channel 279, as well welcoming our viewers live on Wazor TV and as well on Clog TV. You are watching us live from the UPSA auditorium at the 14th anniversary commemorative lecture of Professor John Evans Attah Mills. And as well, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Minister of Education who joined us earlier, Honorable Haruna Idrisu. Thank you so much, sir, for making time to be here. As well, Honorable Zuera Mohammed, MP for Salaga South. Thank you so much, ma'am, for making time to be here. As well, acknowledging the presence of the son of the man we honor today. Ladies and gentlemen, Kofi Sam Attah Mills and his wife. A round of applause. And to everyone who's made time to be here, thank you so much. Professor John Evans Attah Mills was a man of many titles, professor, vice president, and president. But most importantly, I think one of the titles he cherished most was Asumdwehene, the king of peace given to him by the Ghanaian people. In a fitting tribute to the man of the people, we'll close this segment with a tribute in song while we listen to the Symphonia Chorale as they present to us President Attah Mills' song, a melody that encapsulates his life, his humility, and his love for Ghana.
Up
Symphonic Orchestra, thank you very much. Or chorals, thank you so very much. Okay, the Attah Mills song follows. Right, thank you very much. That wonderful Attah Mills tune that got everybody fraternizing and paying homage to each other in the hall, the UPSA auditorium. This is how beautiful it is. Yes, the man brought peace to Ghana. No wonder he is a king of peace. And indeed, that resounding, beautiful tune performed by the choral group. Moving people from their seats to go and pay homage to each other. Okay, I guess you can give us some more tunes as they finish with the formalities. Right. Okay, so let's try and finish the program. All right, this is supposed to take us to our various seats as we continue with the program.
Come in session.
Right, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you may resume your seats now. Let's round up the program. Thank you. Please resume your seats. Respectfully. Thank you. Thank you so much. Please resume your seat. Right. Okay, thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's about time to draw the curtains, but not without hearing from our chairperson to get her assessment of today's proceedings, how she saw things, and how, well, let's invite our chairperson for today, the Honorable Attah Sewa Tete. With a round of applause, please.
Thank you very much. Let me stand on existing protocols, and let me not be the person who stands between you and meeting all the friends and loved ones who you haven't seen for a while and want to say hello to at the end of this program. But it would be amiss of me not to speak to the very strong admonition that has been shared with us through the lecture of our guest speaker, who has reminded us that values are not just spoken, but values are acted. That policy is not just a statement, policy is implementation and execution. That change is made by people not just professing to do something different, but looking at the data, looking at the issues that critically need to be addressed, and taking the necessary steps to ensure that positive change is made, even though that is not a slogan that is normally associated with the NDC. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I think you all would agree with me that the Honorable Professor Frimpong Kwarteng has given us a lot of food for thought and has given those of our compatriots in the NDC who are in government perhaps an urgent task to make sure that the next 2.5 years that are left of this term are used to make a tangible difference that brings down those indicators and makes a real difference in the lives of our fellow Ghanaians. Because the ability to do that will make the re-election of the NDC something that would not necessarily be imposed, but would be given by those who see that indeed transformation has taken place. The party political cycle in which we find ourselves makes us think in short to medium term narratives. And we have heard today that that kind of thinking will not help us as a nation, especially at a time when we enter a world that is more multipolar, where the multilateral system is falling apart, where geopolitics and geoeconomics and interests are going to influence the way in which nations behave with each other. And so it's important for us to take the lessons that were pointed out to us, even if you don't necessarily like the data and the statistics, and understand that this is about building the future that the Better Ghana agenda envisaged. Indeed, the statement, once again, by the Vice Chancellor, that there is the intention to develop the Attah Mills Center of Excellence is most welcome. Just like the Kennedy School of Governance in Harvard, the Attah Mills Center of Excellence in Governance here in UPSA can be used to help to drive that transformation and help us to move from rhetoric to reality. And I certainly hope that next year, when the next edition of this lecture takes place, the beginning of that process would have begun in earnest. And we would indeed be paying tribute to a man who lived his values, who made sure that he did his best within the short time that was allocated to him, that God gave him, to make a difference in our country. When we're listening to the words of the final hymn, "Begone unbelief, my Savior is near, and for my relief shall surely appear. With prayer let me wrestle, and he will perform. With Christ in the vessel, I smile at the storm." I remember hearing that from President Mills over and over again. And it should comfort us that when we are on a path of righteousness, that indeed follows the will of God, with his help and with his assistance, we can and will perform. And our wonderful nation will surely become greater and stronger. And let that be the legacy of President Mills in our lives, in the lives of Ghanaians today, and in the lives of generations to come. Thank you so much. May God bless you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairperson. We truly appreciate you. What a beautiful afternoon it has been. We've been graced with so much today, the wisdom of our speakers, the power of our performances, and the presence of a family that shared their greatest with a nation. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to formally convey our profound gratitude to everyone who's made time to be here today, I am delighted to invite on stage Madam Daniela Mavis Matthias, a member of the JEA Mills Memorial Heritage. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as she conveys the thanks of everyone here.
Honorable Chief of Staff, Dr. Julius Deborah, Madam Chairperson, Mr. Guest Speaker, all protocol duly observed. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the JEA Mills Memorial Heritage, we give a special thanks to God Almighty for His grace and mercies. Our heartfelt appreciation goes to those who contributed to making today's program a success. We are particularly grateful to Professor Kwabena Frimpong-Boateng for diligently and eloquently establishing beyond all reasonable doubt that President John Evans Attah Mills indeed deserves to be, as Mrs. Charlotte Osei so aptly described him in her 13th anniversary commemorative lecture last year, a case study for the Fourth Republic. To the esteemed chairperson, Honorable Hannah Sewatete, your contribution to this event has been indispensable. Madam, thank you. We also thank Honorable Julius Deborah for the privilege of his esteemed presence. To our viewers on various networks, we appreciate your engagement and support. We are grateful for your interest in this event. Finally, to everyone who attended today's program, we thank you for your presence and contribution. God bless all of us and grant us a safe journey back home. And may God bless Ghana. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Madam Daniela Mavis Matthias. Indeed, from the Ashalebuchi Central Mosque, shall we please welcome Chief Imam Ali Muhammad to give us the final prayers in Islam.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I stand on all existing protocols. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. اللهم آمنا في أوطاننا واجعل ولايتنا في من خافك واتبع رضاك يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك الأمن والسلام في غانا. اللهم إنا نسألك الأمن والسلام في غانا. اللهم إنا نسألك الأمن والسلام في غانا. Amen. May Allah bless our country, Ghana.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. So on behalf of Attah Mills Heritage.
Yes, the Memorial Heritage, we say a big thank you. My name is Adia Kwako Sapon. May the spirit of Professor Mills live within us forever.
Shall we go home safely? Thank you. Good night.